the first time I met you, it was honestly a fan moment because people are fans of Bollywood stars. I am a fan of a person who speaks his mind. And quite legitimately, I think if there is one person in this country that can advise both the Prime Minister and can give a gift to Sonia Gandhi, though I don't think she would like to accept the gifts. In words of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she said, he's the Santa Claus who has unrealistic ideas. But I think these days...
It became the idea which transformed India in the 90s.
Absolutely. And what I was just about to say is, if Christmas comes knocking on the doors of the Gandhi family, one Santa Claus whose gift I think they will be very reluctant to take. But you're a scholar, and there is no need to say that, but you've written 25, 30 books now, somebody whose students have gone on to win Nobel Prizes, but the thing which I most fondly remember, I was not born at that juncture, but the thing that I most fondly remember is how you came back, and how you came back during the emergency, and signed your attendance, and then...
I made a speech also. 1 minute speech saying that the obituary was going on. I said, point of order, democracy has also died and it's not in the list.
And then after that you went on and you dressed up as a young Congress thug as you and then left the country. I think there was this movie, sir, called Catch Me If You Can in year 2002, which got released. I think much of those events are inspired by the person who is now talking to us today. I think he's a legend when it comes to Indian politics, when it comes to economics, somebody who's been right from the president of a political party to being a part of the union cabinet, held multiple portfolios. It's an honor, sir, to be able to call you a friend, guide, and mentor and advisor to the organization IIMUN. Thank you for taking your time and coming here and joining us.
You too, at a young age, has created a huge organization of very eminent people we have brought together and foisted me on the top of it.
So it's only possible because there are people such as you who are combined and who are together in that cohort. And the first question is, in the parliament, when you went to the parliament and the 1 minute speech that you made in the parliament, and if I may quote you, you mentioned, I have a point of order.
Yes.
There is no obituary reference for democracy. I just pulled it up because you mentioned it, sir.
Yes.
There is no obituary reference for democracy.
Yes.
It has also died.
Yes.
In today's day and age, sir, there are so many of us who feel that we have the very fundamental rights to move about is something that is restricted and restrained. In your opinion, sir, was the lockdown necessary, especially in areas and districts? And I see your 8 p.m. show, but in districts and areas that's where we did not have any COVID cases, according to you? Yeah.
300 districts. Out of 739 districts, 300 we have none. And in fact, only 81 districts are really where there's a serious epidemic of or pandemic of coronavirus. So I think we should have begun with that and cordoned them off. Second is, we started late. We had information in January, and we could have. In fact, by the way, India was an illegal collaborator in the research on bats, and they assisted the Wuhan University and the US Defense Department to do research in Nagaland, where there are lots of bats. And the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was our party, and they were illegally there. There's an ongoing inquiry now after I raised the matter. So we had knowledge even in December, but the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research didn't pass it on. We came to learn through our embassy in January because there was a formal announcement of the WHO. But the Prime Minister, I think, was so taken up with the idea of Donald Trump coming to India that he delayed it. And in the process, a organization which should never have been allowed to hold a conference in India, the Tablighi, they held a conference and they brought in people who were already infected. And as a consequence, Delhi, for example, would not have been affected so badly but for that conference. So it was a delay. Having decided to lock down, it should have begun with these districts which are not at all, which were affected and seriously affected. In fact, out of the remaining minus 300 from 739, another 250 had less than 5.
Correct.
So therefore, we should have restricted it to the maximum 100, but certainly more, between 81 and 100. So therefore, this wholesale thing had a double mistake, a double fault. And that was that we were already declining in the economy. I had been writing about it from 2016.
Correct.
That we are in a tailspin. And I wrote a book called Reset to say how seriously the situation is. And so this and that have both combined. And the hardest hit have been people who lived on a daily wage. And there are millions and millions. And that is called migrant labor, daily wages, small and medium industries. These are the ones which have been badly. So the human story is really there. For people like me, there's just no problem. I mean, I enjoy the leisure and the seclusion and the freedom from having to race to the airport to catch a flight to go to
We're missing all the live lectures. No, sir. We're missing the live lectures, but I like that look now. I rarely see you in a jacket along with a kurta and this kind of a jacket. So is it? I'm sure
Japanese. It's because I got air conditioning here, so I'm putting it on. It keeps me warm.
I was beginning to wonder, sir. One of the other things that I must ask you is, of course, people such as yourself enjoy the seclusion and also enjoy the much needed break. Because I know even today, you're up at 4 a.m., at 4:30, 5 o'clock, you have a day that's packed from morning to evening with some of the other engagements.
Yes, correct.
But for people like me who rarely have anything to do any which way, this lockdown has become a problem in the sense we're not able to see the positives of the lockdown. And there's so many young people who feel very anxious and who feel that there has been no positive to the lockdown. According to you, has there been any positive to the lockdown or the pandemic as a whole?
Individually, yes, there is vast scope for it. For example, if somebody asks me what shall I do in this lockdown,
correct.
I'll say learn Sanskrit. Why? Because it's the language of the future. It's no more the language of the past. Why is the language of the future? Because now artificial intelligence has decided that in storing knowledge, the best language is Sanskrit. Second, Sanskrit slokas recited between the ages of 6 to 11 develops your brain faster than if you don't do it. And this is even now in schools in London, for example, St. James School, they are requiring this. So if you don't know Sanskrit, learn Sanskrit. If you are wanting to be an economist, learn more calculus, matrices, set theory, because you can't be an economist unless you know mathematics. Because economy is a matrix. It's a multivariate, dealing with multivariate variables. So you should use this pandemonium or this pandemic leisure for learning something which you will not get another chance like, and which you can learn in 2 months.
So basically, we can try to attempt to read all your books, but we will fail miserably because to read 25 books of yours would take somebody like me more than 25 years.
You can read one book, Hindutva and National Renaissance, because the identity of an Indian, which was rubbished by the British.
Right.
We have not yet recovered from that. So what are we? Who are we? This is a question that there are many books, not only mine. I have a book called Hindutva and National Renaissance. And how we can unite our people. It's very interesting that DNA studies say that whether you're a Brahmin or a scheduled caste or Hindu or Muslim, your DNA is the same. All these have appeared in journals of genetics all over the world. So this identity crisis that we have had, unstated, that should be cured by using this spare time.
Understood. So I am an Indian. India is my identity is something that we can.
No, India is not your identity.
It's not mine.
Your India is the name of India was originally Hindustan, not given by Arabs or anything like that. Those are all bogus. It is a sandhi of two words, Hindu Sagar and Himalaya, he from Himalaya. And so anyone born in this, you see, if you look at the Constitution, they have defined Hindu as how? Article 25. This is a fundamental right article. That a Hindu is a person who is not a Muslim, Christian, or a Parsi. I think Parsi should have been kept out because they were our neighbors in Iran and they have totally mingled with us, but doesn't matter. So Hindu is defined not as a religion but as a culture. And after all, so many schools of thought there are, except there are some common things that all religions lead to God is one precept we have, which no other religion has, major religion has, which says my way or the highway. So the identity is a liberal person who is willing to accommodate. To call us Hindutva-vadis as Hitler's followers and so on is rubbish, because Hitler disowned the Jews, saying that they are vermin. We are saying, no, Muslims are part of us. We come from the same parentage. We belong to this nation. So we are on an inclusive thing. And these are some of the things that need to be removed from the mind which propaganda has made us distorted.
And especially for younger people, because I think religious fundamentalism is something that unfortunately TV channels, they keep driving home the point that anybody who is a Hindu is right and right of right and then right of right of right. So, sir, to that end, but let me ask you a few light-hearted questions.
Yeah, sure.
Has the routine of Dr. Subramaniam Swami, a man who used to attend 4 programs in one day, changed from the time, and how has it changed?
Well, I think the most important thing is that these 4 programs would involve my getting up early in the morning and rushing to the airport to be 1.5 hours before the takeoff and stay there, fly, and then as soon as I land, address 2-3 programs, press conference, all that. That I wouldn't call it stress, because I have no stress, because stress comes only when you have an expectation of the outcome. If I say I will do my best, the outcome is to be decided by God, which is what Krishna says you should have. Then you will never have stress. So, but the fact that I have to physically strive, I have to ensure that my driver comes at 4 a.m. in the morning to take me for a flight which is to take off at 6 o'clock. And then to say come back, and the flight comes back at 2 a.m. in the morning, and then reach home, and then next day I have to attend some committee meeting of parliament. So that kind of heavy duty action, that's not there. I am literally, I have a house which has a sufficiently large lawn, and I've been here. I think my wife has never seen me so often as she's.
This must be the maximum time that you spent with your family.
Yes. No, family, of course, they're all grown up. But my wife and I mean, in a month, I would probably see her 10 days of the month. Now I'm seeing all 30 days.
And is that, sir, a welcome change, if I may ask?
Well, she's adjusted to me, so I have no problem. I don't have to adjust to her. She's adjusted to me.
I think probably Ramesh ji was trying to tell me, saying, Rishabh, please ask intelligent questions. Please understand the stature of the man that you're talking to. Do not talk as if you normally talk to me.
No, I'm a professor. I love questions from anybody.
No, sir, but I must ask you, the second part of our show is called Tum Bhi Karuna. So we've taken the word Karuna and we've added things before and after it.
Yes.
So in Tum Bhi Karuna, the first question that I want to ask you is, you spoke about heavy duty. And the first thing that comes to mind as somebody who also helps in the family business is how these duties and how the economy is going to shape up, especially given the fact that, what has been happening from the government's end in many cases. And I've seen Mr. Bajaj's interview and so many other learned people who've been speaking about this, that could the government have dealt with the situation a little differently? And what would you recommend if you were the finance minister?
You mean in the economy?
In the economy, sir. And how would we revive the economy?
Well, the way to revive the economy is to understand which forces of the economy are weakened and how to energize that force. And the force that has been systematically weakened from 2014 by our government is demand. And they began first with this crazy guy in Reserve Bank of India called Raghuram Rajan, who kept on raising interest rates. And once he raised the interest rates, he said, I'm controlling inflation. But he was raising the cost of capital, and the small and medium industries were all closing down, and there was unemployment. And the people who used to borrow small amounts, they had a problem. In the same time, he reduced the rate on fixed deposits of savings of households. So the rate of saving also went down. And nobody seems to, aware that, and all the time we're talking about investment. Investment is supply side. You're producing, but somebody has got to buy it. Even today, if you see all this, the proposals that have come, they're largely on the supply side. They are saying we are giving so much money to the small and medium industries to do what? To produce. Who will buy it? And today, the automobile industry, the cars are galore lying in their showrooms and in parking lots. So whether it's real estate or the automobile industry, across the board, where there's a huge employment potential, not directly but indirectly through like ancillaries are produced by small and medium industries for automobiles. Similarly, cement is produced by somebody else, and iron is produced by somebody else. So real estate going down means all this, they'll all have inventories climbing. So I think we have still not understood the plot, and I don't know why. And they continue all these proposals that have come are all supply side, very few which are on demand. And I think unless you rectify that, you will not be able to recover. But I have noticed one thing in India. Every time we had a crisis, we came out shiny. We had a famine because of this collectivization attempt of Jawaharlal Nehru. Lal Bahadur Shastri changed it and gave a package to 10% of the farmers. They produced a green revolution. We have never needed to import after that. You see, after 1975, we have not been importing food grains from abroad to stave off a famine or something. So similarly, we removed all these licenses and controls in Narasimha Rao's time and a little before in Chandrasekhar's time too. And the process of freeing the economy led to a boom. The growth rate of 3.5% per year, the communists used to call the Hindu rate of growth. It was actually a communist rate of growth. And suddenly we rose in 5 years to 8%. So therefore, we must know that incentives is what drives Indians. The moment you start putting, fatwas to the Indians, they are bright enough to know how to get around it. And since corruption is rampant, it's very easy to get around it.
Understood. So it's basically India will become India shining soon again. But the government needs to follow.
We are going to get a shock before that. See, look at the Prime Minister saying that by 2024, he said it on 2019, that 2024, 5 years hence, I will double the GDP to $5 trillion. Now, doubling in 5 years means 14.4% per year growth rate. I mean, did nobody tell the Prime Minister this? I wrote him a letter telling him, what are you saying? But unfortunately, he's not primarily educated in economics. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong. I am not educated in biology, in zoology, in architecture. Somebody calls me an illiterate in biology, I will accept it. So he's an illiterate as far as economics is concerned. And he doesn't know, you can't say such things, you see. I have to check it out.
So you need to consult the right people. That is what Dr. Swami is saying.
No, you need to consult people who will talk back to you. And not say, find out what you want and say that.
Sir, we take advice from the right people is all I can say. But,
yes, that's right.
but I can't be as bold as you are, but I can say that much. So, moving forward, the next question, again, a very light-hearted question. So, people usually ask who came first, the chicken or the egg. I must ask you, who came first, Gandhi or Mahatma?
When Gandhi landed in India, in Bombay, in 1917, I think, he had already become a Mahatma. The only thing that he added after coming to India was take off most of his clothes and just keep an underwear. I mean, it was called a langoti, but and he became a Mahatma automatically. People said this man came from England. He made so much money as a barrister, and now he's given it all up. So he became a Jnani and a Tyagi. So he became a super Brahmin. The original concept is not birth for a Brahmin. It is if you're a Jnani and a Tyagi, you become a Brahmin. Vishwamitra was born in a Kshatriya house, but he became the Rishi of Rishis, you see. So like that, many others. So Gandhi, once he reached India, he was already a Mahatma. And then he began looking like a Mahatma also after his visit to my hometown called Madurai, where he swore there that henceforth he will only wear a loincloth.
So it was Gandhi that came first, and then but as soon as he came on Indian shores, he became the Mahatma. So then
That's right. He was already a Mahatma. Yes.
He was a Mahatma from before. Dr. Swami, I must go ahead and ask you this because there are many aspiring politicians who are watching this. Many who are from the organization gone on and joined politics, and some who are parliamentarians also. Is politics all about optics? Is there... No, I can ask you this honestly, and you can answer me honestly.
Ask.
Is politics all about optics and just doing the right thing at the right time and saying the right thing and being at the right place?
All through our history, only those are remembered who said what they thought the country should do. And if somebody thought that was not the what is conventional wisdom, as it's called, and discriminated against him, it didn't matter. Gandhi became great because he said what people thought was outrageous at the beginning, removing the British by non-violence. What nonsense. Subhash Chandra Bose, who said, I can raise an army and liberate India, and he nearly did. He came to Nagaland and so on, but unfortunately his patrons both got defeated, both the Germans and the Japanese. But he created an atmosphere. Similarly, Patel was considered as a hardliner, a Hindu fanatic, etc. Today, in retrospect, Patel is a man who made India. He made out of 600 rajas and independent kingdoms, merge into, of them 500 to merge in India. That we have today is India. So if you go back in history, you will see those who originally became unpopular because they did not say what is the conventional wisdom. they are the ones who are remembered later on because their time comes and is proved. I lost my job teaching at IIT. Mrs. Gandhi said, this guy is dangerous. He's talking about 10% growth rate and producing the atom bomb. So he will be thrown out. And that was my making. And today people remember these things. And that's why without any position today, I go anywhere, the big crowds attend. I don't bring them by trucks and so on. I don't need to.
And Dr. Swami, I must tell you, there are thousands of young people also who are watching this live today on Instagram. Yes. And talking about young people, it is only right that because the majority of people who are watching this show are young people, I must ask you a fun rapid fire.
Yeah.
At the end of this show, but I would request you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following words.
Yes.
In most cases, I tell people saying, please answer honestly. In your case, I do not think I need to even bother saying, please answer honestly, because there will be nothing but honesty. And I'll start with a very interesting word. The first word, Sonia Gandhi.
Sonia Gandhi, I will say, would be what we will call Al Capone. First
Okay. Food. When somebody says food, Dr. Swami, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Chinese. I think of China, I think of Chinese food. Somebody asks me what food do you like, I'll say Chinese.
And I think that is the boldest statement coming from any Indian at this juncture, saying the food that I like the most is Chinese.
Yes, everybody knows that.
So the third thing that I would like to ask you is, when somebody says Nehru, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, I will say fake. Because everything he stood for was fake. He said Hindi Chini bye bye, that was fake. He said Security Council seat should be given to China and not to us, that was fake. He said Tibet is part of China, that was fake. He said non-alignment, that was fake. He took Kashmir to United Nations when Kashmir was already a part of India because the instrument of accession was signed by the Raja. That was fake. Everything about him was fake. So when you say Nehru, I think I say fake. Yeah.
Then the next one is happiness. When somebody says happiness,
if somebody says happiness, I will say being all alone. That is my happiness.
And when somebody says books, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Books, what comes to my mind is how to write them.
And I'm sure you can give every author a lesson or two in how to write books whilst you're giving 4 lectures a day. But coming to a couple of very interesting ones, when people say RSS, what comes to mind?
Service before self. It's an organization where human beings have no aspirations for self. I've seen this with my own eyes.
I thought, sir, you would go with Rishabh Sanjay Shah when somebody says RSS.
Rakshana Subramaniam Swami. My wife's name is Rakshana.
But when somebody says Bharat or Hindustan,
if somebody says Bharat or Hindustan, I'll say one is our republic and the other is our identity.
And the second last question, if I may ask you, is when somebody says journalism in India today.
Yeah, if somebody says journalism, to me say no fact checking.
So it's as good as Wikipedia.
No, Wikipedia allows you to correct it automatically. You can enter in and rectify the mistake. Here it is all spin after that.
And so the last question, which I'm sure you will hit for a 6, but the last question that I'd ask you is when somebody says IIMUN, what is the first thing, sir, that comes to mind?
Rishabh is the name that comes to my mind immediately.
I'm very grateful to the thousands who work behind the scene, and I'm very grateful for people such as you for spending time and coming and talking to young people. You said something about a few people not being fake, and if I may say something about you, which is very real. I've seen this man travel with security, with Z security, and with a lot of cover. But he was addressing a young crowd in Ambi Valley City. That's the good opportunity where I got to hear him in person. And I saw security guards standing behind him, and he started with this line. And the first line was, the security guards are not for my protection. They are for your protection. They are to protect you from me. And that was a room full of 1,500, 2,000 young students who were between the age of 13 to 18 cracking up. And the other thing that I remember about that discussion and dialogue is there are three Devis that control everything that happened in the country. And you gave the example of three Devis in Hindu culture and Hindu religion. Yeah. And I honestly, if there's somebody who can engage 13 and 93 with consummate ease and also put to pay any person in any debate, and therefore whichever debate I've seen with this man, I can safely say that there is only one lawyer, one judge, and one jury member, and that is Dr. Swami. Dr. Subramanian Swami, friend, advisor, and mentor to the entire organization at the very helm. Dr. Swami, thank you very much for doing what you do and inspiring young India. It was a pleasure, sir, having you here. Pleasure.